I was an actor for, a minute and a half and realized, hell no, I don't want this, this waiting for someone else to make a decision about me. And then I was fortunate enough to get a casting assistant job with someone named Alexa Fogel and the brilliant Daniel Swee. And they have been my mentors and my inspiration. So
I thought Jeanie was going to have to turn off her phone at some point because I called her so many times when I was watching The Bear. This is unbelievable. How did you do this?
Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's The Business Program. I'm Tangcay, Senior Artisans Editor of Variety. If you're interested in programming like this from the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our YouTube channel. Now, it is my absolute pleasure to have our panel of Emmy-nominated casting directors. Hello and welcome to you all.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. So I'm going to start with a fire round, round robin question of like, what are you watching or binging in one sentence or less? So let's go around, and Rachel, I'm going to start with you.
Seriously. Okay. I am just finishing Under the Banner of Heaven. I was like a little behind, so I'm watching that now.
Wendy?
I'm finishing Ozark.
Theo, what about you?
Just finished The Staircase last night.
Yay.
Linda?
I am watching For All Mankind. I'm watching The Bear. And I'm watching the last season of Animal Kingdom at the moment.
Alexa, what about you? What are you watching or binging right now?
I have watched all of those. And now I'm watching this Turkish series called Para Palace.
Of course you are.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm also watching an Israeli series called Rehearsals. Has anybody seen that?
I've read about it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it yet.
Avery, what are you watching or binging?
No, I'm watching literally all of those shows. I was finishing The Bear. I was finishing The Staircase. Sorry, that's me.
Love it. Meredith, what about you? What are you watching or binging?
I'm watching, last few nights I've been doing the Paul Newman, Joanne Woodward documentary.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
And then I had not watched Better Call Saul, and I started in season 1 I think in March, and I caught up very quickly, and now I'm, completely obsessed with the show. So it was very late, but it have turned into a very passionate fan. So
That's a lot.
I think that's interesting because, I hope I'm not the only one this is true of, that we all have gaps, the thing that you were gonna watch and then too much time went by. So I've never seen Breaking Bad. I have seen Better Call Saul, but I'm like one behind. I have to do this season, but yeah, it's interesting.
Love that. Jeanie, what are you watching or binging?
I still haven't finished Severance. Sorry, Rachel. But doing that.
I'm very offended.
Yeah, you should be.
Yes.
If you want to leave now, I understand.
I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
I'm doing, just started the second season of Hacks, and I cannot wait for the second season of Reservation Dogs.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And I have been watching Reservation Dogs as well. How very interesting in Severance. It's just, I keep starting everything, and then I feel like I keep going and I don't finish it.
That's because you're so busy casting. I mean, we're in a world now where we're in this hybrid. We're half back, half virtual in this case. How have you found that transition in terms of, when you're looking at audition tapes, or like, are any of you back in person, or is it still virtual? And that's for the panel. So I don't know if any of you wants to kick that off.
I've only done Zoom auditions from the very beginning, very, very few self-tapes, and that's still what we're doing. We're still all working remotely because we're all in different places. And it's worked out really well. It's been great.
Yeah, hybrid for me of self-tapes and Zoom sessions.
Same. I've had one in-person session with a director, with like 5 people, and then we all had to test that morning and take pictures of your tests and do that whole process. But other than that, it's been all virtual.
I love that. Let's talk, Wendy, I'm going to start with you talking about Abbott Elementary. I mean, the casting of that show. Talk about the conversations that you had with Quinta and Janelle, Lisa, it's such an incredible cast, but what were you looking for in casting, putting together the teachers of Abbott Elementary?
Well, I think one of the big things was just real looking people. We didn't want too pretty. We didn't want the LA version of Philadelphia. We wanted it to feel truly honoring the teachers of Philadelphia. Quinta's mom was a teacher there, so that was really important to her. Funny without winking at it, at the material, and then it's a different gear to be able to look at a camera and include that point of view. So a lot of the actors that we did read stumbled a bit with as soon as you incorporated kind of like The Office, where you include the camera. And that was a really interesting piece of the auditions. And we did it in 3 weeks. So we were just going.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, my jaw's on the floor with your timing, to that, how much time did you all have to cast, whether it's your current season or your series, just give our audience a feel for your casting windows?
Well, we started pre and then post COVID, so ours was a huge spread that way.
Yeah. Meredith, what about you? What was your casting window for White Lotus?
For season 1, it was about 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks as well, just because the whole process, even Michael writing it, I think he spoke to HBO at the beginning of August, and we were shooting, and he hadn't written anything. And we were shooting by October 25th, and he had written, all 6 scripts. And it was to this, ask me anything else about those 3 weeks of my life, I cannot tell you, but it was very quick, because they had the hotel was only available without guests for a certain amount of time, and we ended up not completely finishing and they had to go back in February to pick up some stuff because they had a little COVID issue. But this season we had more time, but then no one told us about Italian work visas, so it was not as much time as we thought it was going to be, but it was a little bit more for sure.
Avi, what about you? How long did you have?
Literally the first week of lockdown, we cast throughout the pandemic, the first year of the pandemic, the first week.
Wow. Alexa, what about you? How long do you typically have when you're casting and bringing in, new characters? Take us through your process.
Ozark is, because we kill so many people between season, is a little bit, they give me enough time. I usually come in about 6 weeks before the beginning of the season, but this was an elongated season. So we actually shot for a year because we had extra episodes and COVID and location, and it went on for a really, really long time. But in terms of new characters, and also we brought back some characters that would have been a little unexpected, who were very busy, and I knew about that at the beginning, so it gave me time to try and figure it out. It took a really long time to coordinate all that.
Linda, what about you? How long did you have?
It was very cut up, because it was the first one was pre-pandemic. It was the summer before the pandemic. And I had about, I want to say, 10 weeks or something, 12 weeks maybe, to cast that template. And then they were, they went to New York. So we hired other casting directors in New York, which was a blessing in a way. It was Allison Estrin and Henry Russell Bergstein were hired in New York to do the episodes. Most of the series regulars and many of the heavy recurring people were in the template. And then it sort of like kept going back. You sort of saw how the story was going to open up, after that. So that's what got caught up in the pandemic. So they were cross-boarding the first 2 episodes, and then they shut down for about 6 months. So it took a very long time to get that limited series cast. It took about at least a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Theo, what about you bringing new characters into the show? Like how long do you typically have?
Oh, we have no time. We have no time on Ted Lasso. We get the scripts really late. But no, that's not fair, because I do get conversations with the producers about what's coming up and what I should be thinking about. So I start thinking about it and I start doing avails lists. And then once I get the scripts, I figure out who's right and then just go for it ready. So I worked out a system anyway.
Yeah, love that. And you, Rachel, talk about casting Severance.
Ben likes to start very, very early. So I actually do have I had a lot of time on Severance. And then it just kind of got divided up into like different sections, like setting the role of Mark and then starting in on other roles. And then there was like a little break. Then we would pick back up and do more things. And then it kind of carried us basically to the shutdown. But we were almost fully cast by the shutdown. So that was just more like a production thing that happened. And then that settled. And then when it came back up, we kind of kicked back in again. So the whole thing was, I think, 11 years, if I'm getting my math right. But it felt like 11 years, but I think it was truly like a year. I mean, the whole thing must have been like a year and a half from start to finish. But when I try to look back on my jobs with him, they all seem to kind of have the same span, oddly. So I think we start early.
Yeah.
We had the situation on Dropout because we started in pre-COVID where we cast people. And then when we came back, we lost people in that interim. So we had to then recast some people.
Yeah.
This is again for everybody, but like talk about the casting challenges when you have, somebody playing a real life characters. Like, yeah, talk about like what you look for, how much the source material plays a part, or like even the person. I'm thinking, of Inventing Anna, Elizabeth Holmes, like,
Linda,
talk
you
about
go first?
That, Linda.
For me, Shonda went through a couple of people, but for me, it was always Julia Garner. She was at the top of my list just because, and Alexa, this so well. She's just phenomenal. I don't know what to say. I think she can do anything. And I had cast her in a series called Dirty John, in the first season of Dirty John. And I had been following her ever since I saw her on The Americans. And she's I just thought, this is going to take somebody who can kind of disappear into this con artist. And, it was the accent, it was just the attitude. It was sort of physically somewhat, trying to remind the audience of maybe something they had seen, but like a lot of people hadn't really seen her. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like she was super, super, super iconically famous or anything. It was just she kind of became known because of this series. Certain people knew about her, but which left room for Julia to sort of make her own. So I was just looking for like the best actor around.
I think you bring up a really important point, though, which is because I've done real people a lot. And I think there is a difference between doing people that not everybody has seen and people that the world already identifies. So there is a distinction there.
Yeah. It's interesting because we're doing a series at HBO Max about Julia Child. And so in thinking about her past life, we dealt with that a little bit, going, no one really knows the intricacies of like who worked at that television station in the 1960s. So let's play with it a little bit in terms of everything and see if we can get, a more sort of diversified cast.
On Dropout, we had the situation where Kate McKinnon was supposed to play the role originally and then dropped out in the interim. And we were lucky enough to get Amanda. In that case, she was so recognizable. It was really important, I think, to find someone who looked like Elizabeth and had those crazy eyes. But for the rest of our cast, it was really about capturing the qualities of those characters more than an exact match. That was way more important for the storytelling.
Yeah. And you all talk about self-tape and, so many actors are going to be tuning into this. So this is your time to give them advice. But like, what do you wish more actors knew about when it comes to the self-tape process, especially now in this day of like lighting and Zoom and filters? Like, talk about that. Wendy, I'm going to throw this to you and open this up to the entire panel.
Well, I think lighting is still huge. I feel like we should all know this at this point, but lighting and sound. There's so many tapes I get and I can't hear properly, or I can just hear the reader and I can't hear the actor. So just the fundamentals still are important.
The self-tape game is like on A+ from where I sit. The people that audition quite frequently from self-tapes really have it down. And there are some that maybe don't have the opportunities as much, and for whatever reason, even when they do it on their phone and it isn't as glamorously shot, there's a raw edge to it that quite often goes with whatever the character is, so it works. Look, I think the biggest thing is to not have a reader who is overpowering what you're trying to do. They should help facilitate the audition. They shouldn't be a part of it or try to outshine in any way. And volume is a key thing too for the reader. You want to make sure you can hear the actor, and if the reader is the person who's also filming, just make sure that there's a little bit of distance from whatever the device is that they're recording on. In our office, we sometimes, for larger roles, we'll do Zoom audition, sessions, and it's immediate feedback, like being in the room again. So for particular roles or actors, I will do that, but I think it's really about the reader, and just kind of keeping it grounded and real and not trying too hard.
Theo, what about you? What's important for the self-tape process?
I have to say I'm continually impressed. They just get better and better because obviously actors are having a lot of practice doing them. I don't know, I'm less interested in the schmancy stuff, but yeah, the lighting and the sound is quite important. But I don't mind if it's on an iPhone and they're holding it, as long as you can get into the scene with them.
Jeanie, what about you? Tips for the self-tape process.
The thing I tell actors that it's just, to me, the most important thing is really playing the scene. I don't care if it's like this. I mean, yes, you need to be seen. You need to be heard, but play the scene. If you're playing the scene, that's what's going to captivate me. Walk in and out of frame. I don't care, as long as you're playing the reality.
Yeah, I very much agree with what Jeanie just said, and even though my lighting is not so good, lighting and sound, but also I think also because we're not in the room with these people, give us a few options. I think don't just send one. And don't send like 50 either, but 2 or 3 takes of the scene, especially if it's just one scene that you're taping. I think that's sometimes, because a lot of, especially a new show where you don't know the tone, people are, frequency, a lot of series are very secretive about scripts, and, you don't get the whole script. So I think that sometimes is helpful.
I don't put a lot of pressure on actors in terms of self-tapes. I give actors are not, technicians, and I don't think they should spend a lot of money or worry about that part of it so much. And they get, look, sure, you have to be able to see it and hear it, but other than that, I can, and if I need them to do it again, we just ask them to do it again quickly, just with a little more light, or just if the sound just really doesn't work, but hardly ever. And I will take anything. And I agree with Jeanie, you're just looking for them to, give you something about the scene, the character, the context. So there's a lot of rope there for me.
Yeah, I'm pretty basic. I just want to be able to see you and hear you, and everything else is, dealer's choice. I don't think you have to have a big fancy light ring and all that kind of stuff. I think just as long as I could basically see you and hear you, then, if you want to do a scene outside in the woods because the scene says you're in the woods, Godspeed. I love it. You can do whatever you want. So.
What about you, Alexa?
I don't know that I really contribute to this. I haven't really done self-tapes. We wanted to replicate, we were all in a panic when this first happened. And I think everybody dealt with it differently. And for whatever reason, we didn't really talk to each other, or I didn't. And I just said, we've just got to figure out a way to replicate the audition room, and it turned out to be way easier than I thought it was going to be because of Zoom. So we could all do sessions. I mean, we certainly did some self-tapes with kids because that's just a slippery slope to go into, just starting with auditions. But I think also just it's worked out well for us. It's been a little bit easier, and I think it just feels, with the people that I've worked with for a long time, it's not that different an experience unless we get to a callback where you need to remind everyone when to turn off their cameras. But they even the David Simon people got it pretty quickly. I was very impressed. They're old school.
Avi, what about you with the self-tape?
I'm so impressed with all of the self-tapes. I'm so impressed because we're all alone. These actors are all alone. To find someone to read with and to set it up, I'm so impressed with the way everyone has handled it. It's the frustrating part of many frustrating parts of not being in the room, but, we don't give a lot of scripts out. So when we're not in the room with them and we can't give them little secrets and hints about how to shape their auditions, it reflects when they do the self-tape because they haven't read a script. They don't know everything that they need to know. So I'm more intrigued with how well everybody has sent in these tapes. And sometimes we ask for tapes within 24 hours and actors are off book. So I don't know, we're all sort of in this together. It's which take to send to directors and producers when you do get several, but the turnaround is so quickly right now.
Yeah.
But overall, the lighting and the sound, we often have to say, can you read tape? Because, we didn't even get your slate. But overall, I'm incredibly impressed with what all the actors have done.
Yeah. Now I'm going to get into a little bit of your secrets. I mean, you've all been, singled out for your excellence in casting. Talk about finding the perfect fit for each role. Rachel, I know we discussed this earlier, but Britt Lauer's audition for Severance is one that, has come up. But yeah, talk about finding.
I think Severance, the number one thing about Severance was figuring out tone, and everyone getting collectively on the same page about the tone of the piece. And then, then finding people who could navigate that tone. Because even though it's a drama, when I read it, I actually thought it was so funny, and so we ended up, I think most of the cast, not everyone, of course, but most of the cast have big comedy backgrounds, and they were able to really, as we all know, everyone can do everything, but they also, they seem to really navigate the world really well, you know, having the comedy and the, you know, drama part of it spoken to. So that was kind of the big thing on Severance. And then we just, you know, the studio we didn't have to have a big name or, you know, like a big anchor for it, which sometimes happens. And so once that, you know, requisite wasn't, you know, an issue, then we were able to kind of just like do what we wanted. And we did, you know, big old searches. We read tons of people and just really tried to find some, you know, new people or, you know, people that, I mean, just the right people, I should say. You know, they all have their own backgrounds and have worked quite a bit. But that was really the process. We just did a lot of reading, and that's what for self-tapes, it's been a great thing to be able to widen the net much more than I used to be able to. And it was only in the room.
Avi, talk about casting Dopesick and collaborating there, and you know, finding the perfect fit.
Many years ago, I was doing location casting on a film in West Virginia, and it was about coal miners. And so that I lived in West Virginia for many months looking for coal miners, and I don't remember which one of you wonderful ladies were talking about, you know, bringing. It's not a documentary, but these are based on real people. You know, this was a very sensitive topic. And so it meant a lot to me to bring Danny and the team, not actors who can portray addiction, but to feel like they lived in this world and the struggle it was to live in that world and to have an addiction. So it was a very long process. I felt lucky that I didn't have tons of things going on, and I could really focus in on each character and just find just the best for each role. So it very, very important that we nailed it. Very important.
You did a great job.
I mean, well, you're very sweet. I mean, it's always important that we nail it. But I just felt like, you know, I have a lot of problems in my family and my life, but addiction's not been one of them. So I just living in that world, just going, oh my God, you know, born in, it's so unfortunate and then so tender. I mean,
Meredith, what about you adding, you know, casting season 2 and then even just going back to season 1, you know, finding that perfect fit?
I mean, honestly, a lot of times I don't know if it's the perfect fit. I sort of, Michael will be like, "Oh, they're perfect." I was like, "Really?" I mean, I just usually I don't, especially last year. I think we only had the first script. I don't even think I was not aware of like what the storylines were going to be for everyone, and it really was such a rush process. I was kind of like, "Here are people you kind of pick." So, you know, once like, you know, especially like for Murray's character, like I said, kind of sent him a bunch of people and he's like, "These people are wrong. What are you doing?" And then he kind of explained a little bit more what he wanted. And then I was like, "Oh, okay." And then when I sent a new batch, you know, of people and he's like, "Yes, exactly." And Murray was in that bunch of people, but,
and he was genius.
No, I mean, that was one of those things. I don't think I can't remember when I found out what his actual arc was going to be, but I do not believe it was. I think it was after we had cast him, and I. So you know that's one of the, like, I just the showrunner, whomever, always has more information than you know, and then sometimes they're not so good about it telling, you know, what actually will be happening. But I mean, we lucked out. It really was. That was one of those things, like casting gods came down and blessed us, because I really had no idea what was going on. And I wish I could say like, yes, I'm a genius. I was just like, whatever. So
don't sell yourself short, Meredith.
No, but it really was like, it was sort of.
That may have been how it felt. There was design between the confusion.
Yeah. And you only had 3 weeks, which was insane.
Exactly. Yeah. Theo, what about you bringing together the cast of Ted Lasso and then even bringing Sarah into the fold and,
Yeah, it was quite
finding-
similar. It was quite similar to Meredith's experience. Like, tell anyone before Ted Lasso, before we even knew what it was, like try and tell, right, so Jason Sudeikis is going to play like a hokey American football coach and he's coming to the Premier League in London. Like anyone would have just gone, what? What? So yeah, a lot of the casting was like Meredith. I was just, these are my favorite people. What do you think? And then it wasn't until season 2, after we'd seen it, really, that I knew exactly what we wanted and what Jason. It's a very collaborative process. Like all of the producers stick their oar in and tell me what they think, but it's always that the eventual decision is always down to Jason. And I feel like I really understand what Jason wants now, down to the tiniest role. Like I really do know. And Sarah wasn't who everyone else wanted, but I knew that Jason would go for her.
Love that. Linda, what about you? Finding the perfect fit to bring together.
I think if you are lucky enough to have a shorthand with the showrunner writer, which in this case, not only did I have a shorthand, I had spent 17 years with her. Not exclusively, but I was hers exclusively, but I did other things, but I did every speaking role in her world for 17 years. So I didn't really, I kind of know what she wants in a way, and I know what she likes and how she casts. But she was going to tell this story, even though I only had the one script. I knew she was going to tell this story with her with an element of lightness and humor. Everyone had to have a little humor in their souls, whether or not the person in real life had that or not. So, we always look to casting with an eye for that. And also, she likes to reuse people. It's like our repertory company or something. So, we sort of sat there and went, who in our world can play some of these parts? And so that was helpful. And she knew a lot of the real players because she was interviewing them. She didn't have the face-to-face with the real Anna Delvey, but that was all done with letters, because it was interesting. I think Shonda said, because if she had met her, it would skew her in one way or another, in terms of casting and in terms of writing. So they had sort of a communication via email. And but the rest, a lot of them, she interviewed and she knew the qualities she wanted to capture in those people. So aside from the people that were in our world that we knew we wanted to, like Anna Devere Smith, somebody like that, we knew we wanted to put her in the office, in the office, and we knew we wanted to have that sort of triumvirate of people that would bring some humor and some warmth there. It's usually, just auditioning people, and best audition wins. So that's how we did the rest.
Yeah. Sherry, what about for you? Talk about finding, bringing in a brand new, cast member or guest member and finding a perfect fit for each role.
God, going into this season, I think like everybody, we had just come out of COVID and Bill and Alec were very intentional about when we were going to start the show again. We weren't going to really try to insert it into what was happening in lockdown and COVID protocol. So it was from the time that we were starting in February of 2020 to when we came back and a full year later, the scripts had been tweaked a little bit, things had changed. But I think, it's a fine line with Barry because, we do a lot of meta. We insert a lot of people that we want the audience to understand and recognize, and sometimes only our inner circle, like these fabulous women here, would sort of get what the play was and why a person was cast. And then the rest of it, I think, is just very grounded in reality. It's not flashy. It's not fancy. It's you know, real and just sort of connecting to what Bill's vision is, you know, for somebody. You know, Annie, who was played by Laura San Giacomo, he had an idea in his head, and Laura is just a fantastic actress and always game to play and really understands the process and is not afraid to audition. And that's exactly what she did. And she was wonderful and just the right amount of comedy, but also grounded it in what the relationship was going to be with Henry's character. You know, Fred Melamed, the same thing. Miguel Sandoval coming in as Cristobal Michael Irby's, you know, father-in-law. That was, you know, really exciting. And Phil Reeves. I mean, who doesn't love Phil Reeves from anything, you know, that he's been in? So it's just kind of creating that balance. And, you know, when we're on set, Mark Paul Gosselaar was really intentional. It was sort of like, who are those really sort of iconic in a way from series that we all know. And then when you go, oh my God, it's Mark Paul Gosselaar, but it doesn't sort of pull you out of it in a way that, you know, somebody else might. So I don't know, it's a fine line and it's really fun. It's just having a good collaborative, communicative relationship with Bill and Alex.
Jeanie, what about for you?
Well, it's interesting on this piece on Dropout. It was my first time working with the group. So that's always a challenge. And, you know, you have to develop that sort of trust and shared language. And but I think in our case, we had so many roles that she, you know, she was constantly firing people. So it was important to kind of make sure as best we could that people were distinct. Because people were kind of coming and going. We tried to find a balance of known faces, but, you know, known as real deal actors, people we knew were going to be able to kind of nail these sort of fast cameos, combined with some, you know, fresh new faces. It was really exciting to give the young woman who played Erica, who was one of the whistleblowers. It was her first professional job. She auditioned from a room. She was in, I believe, Korea or Vietnam visiting, and, you know, did her callback Zoom session, you know, from this lockdown quarantine she was in. But it took a while to sort of find a rhythm and, again, a shared language and trust with the producers.
I love that. Okay. Let's do like your proudest, you know, you've all got incredible careers, you know, and there are some superstars that have come out, you know, thanks to your discoveries. Like, do you have like, I'm so proud I discovered them way back when moments? Avi, I'm going to start with you.
Oh gosh. Oh, please. Oh,
I know this is.
and you know, I'm proud of so many people. I to single them out makes me feel really uncomfortable. I could throw some names out, but I feel like I've been so lucky. I feel like we're gift givers. You know, I feel like when we're able to offer someone a job and then they turn into, you know, I mean, I could throw out names that are really fancy and I feel really kind of odd. I'm sorry. I don't want to be number one. And y'all I have such respect for all of you. I'm just not a good panel person today.
But I think
me either, Avi, me either.
I feel the same
you know,
way.
I'll tell you one thing. There was an actor in Dopesick that I fought for so many people, and then we all know what fought means. You know, we do, and sometimes I'm obnoxious, and a director won't work with me again because you don't know how far to push sometimes. But I had to put a huge read-through together. And there was an actor, and I asked him to be part of this read-through. And I was so happy that he got a great part. John Hugenacre. Oh. He was such a fun surprise. And so I'm not going to go for, you know, Caitlin Deaver, that, you know, people that you fight for and things like that. But the people that are the other roles that you're so happy when they're not a name and they get a part, that's great.
unless we're walking down a street or we go to a grocery store and we're casting a role and we say to that person, you know what, are you an actor? That, I don't know how often that happens. It's never happened to me, but the discovery comes from sometimes like, I knew Anthony Kerrigan before he was really exposing his alopecia. And he was like, sort of the it guy of his 20s, and to reinvent himself in a way and to be able to be a part of that and highlighting him as is who he is, which is an incredible actor, regardless of the his beautiful exterior and how it changed. It's still beautiful. It didn't matter, and to see him get the accolade that he gets for NoHo Hank is just incredible.
To that, how do you actually get into casting? Like, what is the path into becoming a casting director? Alexa, do you want to take that?
I mean, I still haven't decided I'm going to do this.
I sent Alexa my resume. You have my resume, right?
I mean, my career's been a total accident. So I think also for many people of my generation doing this, we started doing other things in the theater or in similar, adjacent to this. I don't know about the generation behind me or behind them. It's tricky. I mean, I think we're all trying to figure out what the answer to that question is. I don't know the answer.
I had a follow-up question to Alexa. I wanted to know what you would do if you weren't a casting director.
Well, it's not that.
What's the little fantasy job?
I think that all my fantasy jobs that I used to have, I've decided I wouldn't want because they would be ruined by having to actually do them.
So anybody else want to add on to Alexa, like how do you get into it?
I was an actor for, a minute and a half and realized, hell no, I don't want this, this waiting for someone else to make a decision about me. And then I was fortunate enough to get a casting assistant job with someone named Alexa Fogel and the brilliant Daniel Swee. And they have been my mentors and my inspiration. So
I thought Jeanie was going to have to turn off her phone at some point because I called her so many times when I was watching The Bear. This is unbelievable. How did you do this?
The anxiety that show gives is
it's so good.
So good.
So good.
And not watch it too close to bedtime or you couldn't fall asleep. It was really.
And you're hungry.
Yeah.
And you're hungry, yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else want to give advice on how to get into casting?
Internships were big. I mean, I don't know in the post-COVID world, or since we've been on lockdown, but I mean, I certainly came up through the internship world in Seattle with Patty Callis and then Link Caro in Vancouver. And so that was a path I think a lot of people took.
Yeah. I knew for me, I wanted to do something in the industry. I didn't know what it was going to be. And so I had interned in New York for like a producer and then in Chicago at like a talent agency. And then I got a fax, if everyone remembers faxes. And they were looking for an intern or an assistant at a casting agency in Chicago, this woman named Jane Brody. So I went and worked with her. And then for me, it was just like, she wanted to get out of the business kind of quickly as I was there. It clicked, I really loved it. I was like, this is it. And then I bought her company. So then I was in Chicago there for like 8 years and then moved to LA.
But I think, Jazz, in terms of I studied theater directing and then worked in an off Broadway theater when the casting director left. But I think in terms of this generation now, I mean, we all have very similar paths in that we kind of worked for people or learned on the job and that was a path to this. But yeah, I don't know exactly how it would work right now.
it's harder now. The whole internship world changed.
I think the bottom line is you have to have a passion for it. You have to have a passion for actors. You have to love actors and you have to love stories and want to imagine how they would be peopled. You can't just, I've interviewed so many assistants and people that want to get into casting who are just sort of like, well, I don't know. I just kind of fell into it. And they don't know anything. They don't know one single thing about anything. They don't know anything about classic movies. They don't know anything about, actors from the past. They don't have any kind of foundation. And I think there has to be a foundation of, passion even for the industry and for stories. And you can't listen. Yeah, maybe you can get along just sort of putting people in roles, and I'm sure there are people that exist like that. But I think if you have a strong passion for the world of actors and acting and getting the perfect, actor for a role, getting, as Avi said, that actor John for Dopesick, or, putting Tom Pelfrey in Ozark. I mean, this is not something that you just like, hey, you have to feel it. And it can take years to sort of get to that point. And it can take years to get to a point where you stand up to a showrunner and say, hey, guess what? You are going to see Kyle Chandler. You are. I know you don't want to, but you are going to meet him for Friday Night Lights. Sometimes it just takes a little while to sort of not be afraid. It's sometimes it's jumping into the fire casting. It's not easy. And it's not for, you've got to have, what's the good word? Chutzpah. I don't know. You've got to stand up to certain people. Your opinion counts.
I've definitely started to say that in meetings now with producers when I meet them. I said, I just going to let you know, I will fight you.
Yeah.
I feel strongly about something. Ultimately you have the say, and I will be respectful in the end, but I just want you to know I have no problem fighting for people.
I'm sure that I've lost jobs over this, but what I say is similar but different, which is that I like to work with people who think I'm right most of the time.
Yeah.
So much better said.
I love that. Well,
for this show, Hacks at HBO, just an example of that, when we first had a conversation, there was no casting director on it or anything yet. And when we had first had a conversation, Sarah Aubrey said to me, who do you want for the lead? Because I just had the one script. And I said, well, I want Jean Smart. But I'm not going to say anything for like 6 weeks. We don't even have a casting director. We'll just talk to everybody. Let's see what they want. And within, I think, 30 seconds on this phone conversation, because they wanted somebody else. And I was like, no, that can't happen. And I just said, well, what have you guys thought about Jean Smart? And we literally had to put the phone on mute because we started laughing so hard, because I just said, I'm not going to say anything for like 6 weeks. But sometimes you just can't help yourself, and you just got to teach people, it's like, do as I say. Oh my God. That's my password, actually. Do as I say.
Love it. Well, on behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, that was such a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, your process, your craft, and all that incredible advice with our audience. And best of luck to you all at the Emmys, and see you on Labor Day weekend.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Congrats, everybody.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.